Okay, so today what we are trying to do in this module, in this lecture, is to complete the module 2, which is cyber kill chain, the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain. We have covered the 7 stages of Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain, namely reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and eventually actions on objectives. So, we have to wrap up by actually discussing a few important things about defense, right. So, we saw that the idea of Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain is that you can stop any of the stages of the cyber kill chain, and that way you break the chain that the adversary was trying to create and in your organizational network. And to do that, you have to have defense in depth. That is, you have to first try to stop the reconnaissance, creating very robust rules and policy with respect to social media presence, data leakage, etc., as well as all the internet facing systems or services should be hardened. You try to, if you fail to stop the reconnaissance, then you try to stop the weaponization, and so you have to have proper malware security. You have to have the ability to check what is happening in your devices inside your organizational network that people are using and connecting to your network, or you have to have good antivirus on people's devices. So, that is way you can stop that part of the chain. However, in case you even fail to do that, you have to also have to try to stop the delivery. So, delivery, you can have better email security, spam filtering and filtering of phishing emails. You can actually make awareness a high priority of your organization, so that people do not get into the phishing traps, or you can do cyber drills or phishing drills to make people more aware and on their toes, or you can actually also harden your internet facing services and the operating system, these applications or middleware that you are using to make your presence in the internet. If you fail in the delivery, then you have to try to stop the execution, and to stop the execution, you have to figure out how you can detect when some unwanted binary is being executed, and how you can stop them from being executed. So, you need endpoint security, you need agents on the endpoint, so that they can stop this from happening. Then if you fail in execution, then you try to do that in installation when the persistence is being created. So, to create the persistence, what people might do is register it on the registry, or they can put this binary into the startup folder, various other ways to do the persistence through installation. So, you have to have again endpoint security to stop that. Now, what you if you are failed to do that, then you have to stop the C2C or command and control traffic. So, you have to observe the traffic, do network monitoring to see whether some C2C traffic is actually going to certain IP addresses, URLs. You may have to use some AI/ML technique to detect which URL is actually might be C2C URL, or you have to have threat intelligence regarding IP, various IPs that might be part of the C2C or command and control infrastructure of the adversary. And if you do not succeed in stopping the C2C traffic, then chances are the malware or the payload has already been working in your system. It is probably trying to do privilege escalation, it is probably trying to do internal reconnaissance, it probably is trying to do movement through the network, etc. So, to stop that, you have to have other techniques, like for example, if they are trying to do data exfiltration, then you have to figure out how to do data loss prevention, you have to have detection of large amount of data getting out of your system, which is anomalous, which does not seem normal, or privilege. If the you have to have what we call PIM, the monitoring the privileged accounts and privilege usage, or you may have to do various network monitoring to see whether there is an internal reconnaissance, or you have to also see whether somebody is trying to do encryption of your devices. So, as soon as the encryption starts, if you could actually detect that through, let us say, use of trap files and things like that, you could actually stop that. So, the main lesson here is that it is a defense in depth. You have to continue to organize your defense with the hope that you will stop it at one of the 7 stages. So, this whole idea is based on the fact that the defender is vigilant, and defender is self aware in the sense that it is monitoring the network, it is monitoring the activities in the devices in the entire network, all the devices, and have their logs, have the events, have all kinds of information, new files being created, new logins happening. All that information must be coming in real time to a what we call SIEM, the security incident and event management server, and from there it should generate alerts based on rules or AI/ML models. And then there is a whole remediation team sitting in the security operations center. They look at the alerts, they immediately take some action. Some actions may be trivial, some actions may require quite a bit of work from them. So, to do this you have to also train these people who are actually working in your security operations center. They should actually be able to recognize signs of various kinds of intrusion. They should be aware of the modus operandi of various advanced persistent threat groups, how they work, so that as soon as they see alerts, etc., if you do not have any specific AI/ML technique or signature based techniques to detect that this is let us say APT28 or APT3 or any kind of advanced persistent threat group cannot be recognized by the AI/ML model, you may actually have good eyes of the very well trained SOC engineers to actually do that. So, knowing the patterns and knowing the various ways that the threats are carried out by various threat actors would certainly help, and that is what this threat intelligence analyst training is all about, that you might have seen in various places being advertised as one of the certification programs by, let us say, EC Council and others. So, basic idea is that you have to get ahead of the threat actor. You have to be always vigilant and always in the defensive posture to actually stop him at any of the stages that you can. Now, the issue is that how does the defender learn, right? So, the defender has to learn all these things by analyzing the incidences. So, that is why you will have cyber forensic experts who actually do forensics after the incidents happen. So, incidents happen in the SOC parlance, SOC terminology. First of all, there are events. Events happen. Events may actually rise to the level of alerts because it looks anomalous, or a series of events may look anomalous, and the signature based pattern matching might tell the SOC analyst that there is something that needs to be looked at. So, it will generate alerts. And then if for certain kinds of alerts based on the threat intelligence that you have put into your system, you might actually declare something as an incident, and if the incident rises to a level where things are requires a lot of resources, lot of people getting involved, stakeholders getting involved, then we say that is a cyber crisis. So, this kind of things, whether when something is declared as an incident, when something is declared as an event, when something is a crisis is based on this organization's cybersecurity policy. So, they have to think ahead that when do I call something as event, something as alert, something as incident, something as crisis. Now, when any of these things happen, especially incidents happen or crisis happens, most probably you have been compromised, and if you have been compromised, there are various kinds of indicators in various parts of your system. It could be in your network packet trace that you have stored. If you did not detect it in real time, then you have the packet stream stored. You have the devices that might have been compromised with malware. So, you have to look at their memory dump, you have to look at their disk file system and figure out what happened, and through the network trace you can reconstruct how the malware came in. So, did it come through an email, or did it come through as somebody visiting a website, or did it come through an USB drive, various things. So, you have to look at these things, and then once you look at these things, you have to know how to block it, right. So, you might have failed this time, but you will learn from this that this is how how to block it. So, and then also in case you have an incident which eventually did not lead to a large scale compromise or data exfiltration or ransomware encryption and things like that, then we say that that incident has been somehow an attack has been thwarted. But in that case also you have to do the forensics to analyze how it really happened, which part of your defense did not work properly and why it did not work properly. Was it the patterns were not there in your system to recognize, or was it that your AI/ML model failed, or is it because your firewall rules are inadequate, or whether your email filters which are supposed to stop malicious attachments and so on is not working. So, this is the way you have to get the your own threat intelligence. So, as I said before, the threat intelligence can be collected from various different sources. So, one is your own learning from your own incidences, but also you might get threat intelligence from various vendors who actually collect various incidences around the world and convert them to threat intelligence. You might also get it from your regulators or your CERT, the cyber emergency response team collections and feeds. So, there are various ways to get threat intelligence and feed that into your defensive equipments, protection equipments like firewalls and intrusion detection systems and endpoint detection systems and so on, to continuously upgrade this this software, the network monitoring software, intrusion detection software, your firewalls and so on and so forth, in order for you to actually get this thing ready for the next onslaught. So, that is the idea of defenders. Now, the thing that we talk about to these days, we do not say that we can never claim that my organizational system is 100% secure. Nobody can claim that, because there would be certain ways for the perpetrator to get into your system. Like we discussed in Stuxnet case, it was through the USB drives. In case of the attack on Ukraine, it was through the email, phishing email to high level executives. So, you cannot ever be 100% sure that you will be protected. So, having the protection protective devices or protective hardware, software, whatever you have, applications, does not necessarily mean that you can rest easy. So, nowadays we say that we do not say it is a cyber secure system, we try to make this system cyber resilient. So, resilience is the term that we discussed before. Resilience is the term for when your system can continue to function even in the face of very strong attacks. In this case, in other kinds of things, it may not be necessarily attacks, but resilience is from your ability to function maybe with a lesser performance or lesser effectiveness, but at least it should not be completely crash or crash and burn or something, right. So, it has to be what we call a graceful degradation of quality of service, but you should be at least provide some functionality, and in case if the compromise is does compromise the functionality, then you have to very quickly recover. So, as soon as the attack stops or attack is withdrawn, then you should be able to recover very fast, and that timing that is required to recover is kind of a measure of your resilience, right. So, if your system gets attacked and you are inoperational for 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, it is bad. That means you are not very resilient. If it takes a couple of hours, you are much better resilient than the other one. So, that is the idea of resilience, and resilience is the only way we can actually measure how effective our cyber security is. We cannot have, as I said, zero risk or zero attack or a kind of scenario. And as I also mentioned before, that the APT, the Advanced Persistent Threats groups, are actually funded by nation state, and they are very resourceful and they are very knowledgeable. So, therefore, they find various types of ways to do the attack, and you can be rest assured that they will sometimes penetrate through your protections, and therefore, you have to be able to know how to function and how to actually recover very fast. Some cases you may have to respond. So, you have to be kind of agile so that you can defend faster. So, later on, like in this course, we will talk about the measure of resilience, or what we call CRR. It is a cyber resilience measurement that you will look at, and you will see that there you can be various levels of resilience. You may be totally non-resilient, or you could be resilient to some extent, but the best resilience comes when your system is adaptive. Your system adapts to the onslaught of DDoS attacks, or system has enough redundancy that it fails over to another part of the system to actually provide the functionality to its clients or customers. So, adaptiveness or adaptivity is the name of the game in case of you really want to be resilient. So, as I said that and you must have read the paper from Lockheed Martin. So, this idea of kill chain is that just one mitigation breaks the chain. So, they think that it is an advantage for the defender that the defender has to actually break the chain at one stage, whereas the other guy has to, the adversary has to do all the stages. But I do not see that as realistic, because what is happening is that you cannot be sure. So, you cannot have like, okay, I will target this installation stage, or I will target this reconnaissance stage, or I will target the C2 stage, command and control stage in order to break the chain, because you do not have the exhaustive way of doing them, right. So, you cannot be sure that if I just focus on let us say command and control, I will catch all kinds of command and control traffic to stop them, right. There are as I mentioned before, there are algorithmic URL generation, there are very quick migration from one IP to another for the command and control server. There are various ways these adversaries can actually fool your tools or abilities to actually break the chain. So, I think that you have to do defense in depth. You have to arrange for defense at for every stage. So, that way really you do not get a whole advantage, and as it says here, the defender has 7 opportunities to break the chain, which means it has to have 7 types of defenses, right. So, it cannot just rely on only one stage, that I will break that stage and I will get the mitigation. So, the conclusion, in conclusion, we can say that defenders can have the advantage if you think it like in that perspective, that you have to just break one stage and the others have to the adversary has to do all the stages. But bigger issue is that the defender has to do better communication and mitigate risks. And when I say better communicate, we mean that you have to communicate, you have to always assess the risk, and later in this course we will talk about risk assessment and risk mitigation. Also, you have to also make all your employees who are actually using or in charge of various assets, cyber assets in your organization, they have to know about these risks, and they have to know all kinds of ways threats can be unfolded on them. So that they can do better, make better decisions while using these assets. You also have to build real resilient design. So, resilience is now the actually name of the game in cybersecurity. So, you make sure you understand that making systems cyber resilient is very important, more and more important these days. And then you have to measure and continuously improve. Now, this is often not understood by many cybersecurity teams, that if they actually do a one time risk assessment, then they actually figure out what are the possible threats. They might use a kill chain or other ways of formulating how the threat actor might work in their system, and then they actually put in the defenses, like they can put perimeter defenses, they can put endpoint defenses, they can put network monitoring, they can put AI ML tools for intrusion detection or malware detection. They might do all these things, and also train the people and so on, but they have to continuously measure how effective they are in their defenses, and then based on the measurement results they should identify where they went wrong in an attack, or where they can improve in case they did not face at least did not know about an attack, but attacks are happening all the time. Now, the question is how aware you are, or how vigilant you are, how your monitoring, how effective your monitoring systems are. You may or may not see the attack, but in any case, if you want to actually do better, then you have to continuously improve, and to improve you have to measure how effective you are. So, remember, there is no such thing as secure. Systems are only defendable, but not necessarily 100% secure. So, you have to think differently than you might have been doing, because most of the cybersecurity training that people usually get, there we talk about network security, or we talk about application security, or we talk about operating system security. We do not necessarily talk about a very goal oriented, highly resourceful attacker, and how they can actually string together vulnerabilities that are in your network, maybe in your perimeter defense, maybe in your endpoints or devices, maybe in the people, like by doing social engineering on them. So, you have to start thinking about that, and once you start thinking about that, you can get know where you might have to improve in your cybersecurity posture. Like, is it the processes, or is it that you are not investing enough? Is it that you are not communicating the risks and the threats to the team and the leadership to get the proper investment into cybersecurity by the organization, or staffing you are not getting, and then your architecture, whether your architecture is strong enough. And second thing is that you have to know your threats. So, to do something well, especially in this thing, in cybersecurity, you have to know what are the threats, and many times we actually get into trouble because we did not think about the threats. The threats, what can happen, how can somebody do social engineering, or how can somebody do unpatched exploit an unpatched application, or unpatched operating system, or unpatched service that is running on the internet, whether somebody can exploit unnecessarily open ports in where some process is listening that you were not aware of, or how people may be unaware of logins that are being attempted several times and eventually succeeding and all that stuff, or whether your OTP etc. are properly protected. All this kind of stuff you have to think about. So, the last thing in this context is this courses of action matrix. As I have been telling you that this is just a model, right. So, this is a one way of organizing your thoughts and organizing your plans to actually do what how am I going to make my system resilient, right. So, what this matrix is showing, we will see similar metrics in another context when we go beyond these LM cyber kill chain, but we actually go into like MITRE TTPs, or we go into the unified kill chain and things like that. But in this case also, this is something to actually, if you remember this table, that can be very good for you, because you see that at various stages there are ways to detect whether something is happening, there are ways to deny something from happening, there are ways to disrupt that thing from happening, there are ways to degrade the ability of the adversary, or there are ways to deceive the adversary into thinking that it is achieving its goal, but while you are actually observing them, and then you can also destroy adversary. But you will see that in the MITRE defend case, this thing will be slightly differently formulated, but they all are giving you a good way of good terminology and sort of like ontology to actually think about how to organize your defense and how to organize your resilience, right. So, for example, here we are saying that if you want to know whether somebody is doing reconnaissance, now there are many ways to do reconnaissance. Here they are showing you actually one possible reconnaissance, that is true by visiting your websites, organizational websites, identifying the people, their contact addresses and so on, so that they can do spear phishing, phishing emails etc. in a very targeted manner, because they also will put those phishing email language and everything based on that person. So, it is very personalized. So, it is highly likely that the person will trust that email and click on some link and so on. So, in order to know whether some strange people are actually doing visiting your websites and trying to scrape data etc. So, then you can actually look at that from the web analytics, or Apache log or Nginx log or whatever web server you have. You can try to see whether there are some anomalous activities. So, that is for detection. If you want to deny for reconnaissance, you can also do various ways like access control list or firewall, so that they cannot actually access certain web pages. So, certain web pages may be behind the authentication wall or some kind of firewall etc., or for if they try to automatically scrape your websites, then you can actually use web application firewall etc. to do that, to stop that. So, that is a deny. Now, there is you could probably think about how to disrupt this by maybe, or deceive them by putting in names of people who do not belong to your organization and wrong addresses or something, but usually that is not done. So, that has other repercussions with respect to very reputation of the company and so on. Weaponization, if somebody is trying to weaponize your weaknesses, so you can actually use a network intrusion detection system or NIDS to detect that some email is coming with malware attachments, or you can also detect whether somebody is sending a payload through the network to target one of your web services and things like that. And if you are a little more advanced, you can also use network intrusion protection system, and that will actually provide you with not only detection, but may actually protect you by stripping off those payloads from the or stopping those packets and send it for forensics by denying to actually deliver those packets to the actual target and so on. Now, in case of delivery, the detection, now delivery could be again in this case, as I said, that this phases like reconnaissance for example. So, through web analytics we can only stop one kind of reconnaissance, right. We cannot stop for example people doing network scanning to find your services that are running with vulnerability and so on. So, similarly in delivery case also, when they say that the detection requires vigilant user, they are only talking about one type of delivery, that is probably through email phishing or vishing or smishing, etc. You can also stop this delivery through proxy filters. So, you can have these web proxies, or you can have the email proxies, so that you have some filtering before it is delivered to the end user. You can also disrupt them by having inline AV, that is when the antivirus is not waiting to detect whether something is a malware after the payload reaches the endpoint, but eventually the payload has to go through your network to eventually go to the target email server, or from email server to the endpoint email client of the user. So, you can actually observe the network traffic and reconstruct the files that are being delivered, and in case you find that the file is a malware that is trying to be delivered, then you can stop it, right. So, you do not have to necessarily send this to the user, deliver to the user. But in case it is an encrypted traffic, the best way is to actually have web proxies, so that the termination point of the encryption is at the proxy, not all the way to the end user. So, at the proxy the traffic will be unencrypted, and then you can apply AV on the traffic if the traffic contains malware. Degradation you can do by actually slowing down suspicious traffic, right, not necessarily stopping them, but you can create queuing delays, so that immediately something does not happen, and during the queuing you may actually do also some kind of a filtering. Now, if you focus on the exploitation phase, what will happen is that in the exploitation phase the payload is already in the user's device, right. So, you have it has been delivered and it is on the user's device. So, it is a host intrusion detection system, or what we call endpoint detection systems nowadays. That is where the exploitation can be stopped. If the intrusion detection is good, it can be detected at least, and once you have detected it, then you can do various things. But if it is detection, usually the host intrusion detection or endpoint detection usually puts an agent on the device, and the agent reports all the activities that are happening at the endpoint to a management server. So, by the time the management server realizes that the endpoint has been infected, and some file malware file has been downloaded, etc., it's probably late in terms of in terms of stopping it. But the way to stop here, a way to deny, is to actually have a fully patched system, like your operating system, middleware, firmware or applications have to be fully patched. That is, there should not be any known vulnerability that the users might be able to exploit in case they are able to execute or detonate the payload. That does not necessarily 100% mean that you will be able to stop everything, because as I said that there could be 0-day 0-click vulnerability that could be actually that may not be able to be fixed even with a patched version. And then to disrupt execution, so there is this DEP is data execution prevention. So, this is one of the way to actually stop buffer overflow attacks, right. It does not necessarily mean that 100% DEP means 100% freedom from buffer overflow attack. There are other ways to do buffer overflow attack, especially through return oriented programming, through using heap overflow, etc. So, data execution prevention is one way of stopping the execution of binaries from the stack, the program stack. So, but it is listed because this is one way. Of course, this is not the exhaustive way or 100% guaranteed, but it can happen, it can help. Installation phase, like that is where you are trying to, where the adversary is trying to create persistence by making the binary it has downloaded on your device to actually write itself onto the startup folder, or putting it in the registry, auto run registry key and all that stuff. So, in that case again the HIDS will help in detection. If you say that okay, anything that comes other than this set of binaries, any other binary that comes has to run inside some kind of a environment that is very limited, that does not have access to the entire file system and so on, you can do that. So, that is what is called a change root jail. So, you can actually try to deny this binary or payload to get access to all your files and everything if you put it in a change root jail, but usually that is very problematic for users because many of the binaries they want to run are not necessarily malware, they have to run it, especially developers. So, in that case putting everything in change root jail may be a little bit bad, problematic for the user. And disruption is when the antivirus stops, quarantines a binary or payload and does not allow it to be executed. In that case you are disrupting the installation. Similarly, in the C2, that is command and control, you can detect the command and control traffic by having a network intrusion detection system. You can deny the C2 traffic through configuring the firewall very quickly adaptively, or using also some access control system. Also you can also have what we call the micro segmentation or segmentation of the network. So, so you can actually have certain parts of the network in so isolated that it is very difficult to establish a communication to command and control from there. But yeah, I mean this is the denial, and then if you want to disrupt the C2 traffic, then you can actually have a network intrusion prevention. So, the prevention once it detects that this traffic is C2 traffic, it just does not, it is not like it just reports that, but it actually effectively try to block that traffic by configuring rules or firing certain functions. So, that is an IPS. Tar-Pit is actually very similar to what we saw in queuing. So, it is a degradation method that you will actually slow down the traffic, so that you do not have the kind of traffic that the C2 server needs to have, kind of traffic, the packet rate etc. Can be disrupted. So, the C2 effectiveness of the C2 server will be at least in communicating with your device, the malware that is now currently in your device will be actually degraded. You can also deceive by doing a DNS degrade, that is you can actually have the DNS local DNS service, that is a local DNS resolver, to translate the URL into some known IP address that you are controlling, so that the traffic really never gets to go to the actual server controlled by the adversary. So, that, but usually the malware nowadays are actually going to be aware of this trick, and they will try to do various tricks to actually avoid they might self destruct when they see that you are doing a DNS redirect, and you may not be able to actually do any kind of forensics. Then actions and objectives is like you see that okay, it is trying to encrypt a device, or it is trying to move from one machine through a weak protocol to another machine and so on, or it is trying to do a privilege escalation. So, audit logs can help in detecting them. It is very difficult to deny, because this is a stage where everything is totally the adversary has gotten to do everything in the all the 6 stages, and it has succeeded. So, now the payload is in your device. So, your device, it is very difficult to stop it from doing things. It may not succeed if you have a hardened application. So, privilege escalation can be stopped by if your application has no such vulnerability that allows privilege escalation. If your operating system is totally hardened and has no vulnerability, that kind of stuff can actually stop the action on objectives. But this action on objectives is kind of catch all in case of in the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain. So, there are many things the payload can do, right. So, depending on what it would do, then denial process will be, denial method will be the related to that. You can degrade the quality of service, so that you can actually stop, for example, if you can slow down, you can probably have the malware not work as fast, and thereby you can actually contain the damage. You get enough time to contain the damage. Honeypots are the way to deceive. So, you can actually do something like a honeypot orchestration, by which you will actually when the attack is happening, you detect the attack, but you are not able to stop it. So, what you do is you actually somehow redirect the attack traffic to a honeypot service, which looks very similar to the service that is being attacked. So, the attacker would then think that it is actually working on your device or on your system, and try to do other things like bring in additional payloads or communicate with other C2 servers and so on, and you can gain threat intelligence from that. So, that is what honeypot does. So, that is all about this thing. So, the other thing is that, if you have to see, as I said, that you have to keep measuring for effectiveness, right, over time, whether you are doing better, right. So, here is an it's kind of a made up example. Like, organization may want to see whether in December it was able to like detect something, weaponization, but it did not stop there, but it could stop the delivery by having mitigation and so on. Now, in March it might find that it was able to stop mitigate the exploitation, installation and C2, and then in June it might say that it was detecting weaponization again and so on. So, you can actually figure out that in the December time you learned something, and you actually use that. So, that is what they are calling leveraging the new indicators. So, you get some indicators of that, like what things were compromised, what IP addresses were in the C2 were used in C2, what malware was used. All this information is called the indicators of compromise. So, you feed that into your protection devices like your firewall, etc., your endpoint detection and so on. So, hopefully next time if the same adversary comes with the same infrastructure and the same set of techniques and so on, you should be able to stop them. But if it is a different adversary, different indicators, you may not be able to stop them, right. So, at least you may not be able to stop them based on this learning in December. You might have other sources of threat intelligence about other threat actors that you might also have fed into your devices, and from that you might be saved from this other threat actor. But each threat actor has a different set of indicators of compromise. So, one threat actor's indicator of compromise may not necessarily always help in stopping the other threat actors. But so, this is an ongoing process for the defense team of an organization, cyber defense team, to actually continue to learn new threat indicators, the new indicators of compromise, new ways of attacking, new threat models, and then use that information very effectively. If you do not use that information effectively, then it is not any good, right. So, that is the idea. And again, this Lockheed Martin kill chain, cyber kill chain, is actually a way of organizing your thoughts and way of organizing your defense in response to what the attackers might do. So, it is a way of thinking or conceptualizing what the attackers might do. Does not mean that attacker is exactly following these 7 stages, or even like there are other things might be outside these 7 stages that the attacker might do, which may not be even be properly captured in this model. So, it is a model. Think about it as a model and way of thinking about the adversary and the threats, and way of organizing your defense based on that framework. Will now move on to the other frameworks where you will see more fine grained way of looking at these things. So, that is where we will stop this lesson.